The crystal chandelier cast shadows across the mahogany dining table as my father's eyes fixed on my uniform with undisguised contempt. "Carter," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "That cheap polyester costume makes you look like a mall security guard." The entire family fell silent. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. My sister Emma stared at her plate. But what my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in exactly 3 days, the highest-ranking officer in the Pacific Fleet would render the sharpest salute of his career directly to me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The Blackwood family dinner table had always been a battlefield disguised as fine dining. Growing up in the sprawling estate in Newport Beach, California, every meal felt like a performance review where I consistently failed to meet expectations. My father, William Blackwood III, had built his fortune in commercial real estate, turning vacant lots into shopping centers and empty warehouses into distribution hubs. His success was measured in square footage and profit margins, concepts, as concrete as the foundations he poured. My older brother Marcus had followed the family blueprint perfectly. Harvard Business School, followed by a swift ascension through Blackwood Properties executive ranks. At 28, he was already managing multi-million-dollar developments and wore his success like armor, Armani suits, Swiss watches, and the kind of confidence that came from never questioning your place in the world. Then there was me. Carter William Blackwood IV, the son who had somehow inherited all the family's stubbornness but none of their business acumen. While Marcus was closing deals, I was studying advanced mathematics and engineering physics. While he was networking, at country club events I was buried in technical manuals and strategic warfare theory. My path had been clear to me since high school, but explaining it to a family obsessed with real estate empire building was like describing color to someone who had been blind since birth. The tension had been building for months. Every family gathering became an opportunity for my father to express his disappointment in increasingly creative ways. When I graduated from the Naval Academy at Annapolis, he attended the ceremony but spent the reception complaining about the government salary I'd be earning. When I completed my initial training and received my first assignment, he made jokes about me playing sailor while Marcus closed his first 8-figure deal. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the mockery had an edge that cut deeper than usual. The housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, had just finished serving the main course, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, paired with a wine that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The conversation had been typically focused on business. Marcus discussing his latest acquisition of a defunct shopping mall in Phoenix that he planned to convert into luxury condominiums, my mother sharing updates from her charity board meetings, and my father holding court about market trends and zoning law changes. I had been content to eat quietly, knowing that any contribution I made would likely be dismissed or redirected toward my lack of business sense. My uniform was pristine, every crease sharp, every button polished, shoes gleaming under the dining room lights. I wore it with pride, understanding the weight of responsibility it represented and the trust that had been placed in me by my commanding officers. That's when my father's attention turned toward me with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. "So, Carter," he began, setting down his wineglass with deliberate ceremony. "Still playing dress-up in that costume, I see." The words landed with the impact he intended. "How much did the taxpayers spend on that polyester masterpiece? It looks like something you'd buy at a Halloween store." Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. At 19, she was still living at home while attending UCLA, and she had become skilled at reading the room's emotional temperature. Her eyes darted between my face and father's, sensing the brewing storm. "It's not polyester," I replied calmly, though my jaw tightened slightly. "It's a wool blend fabric specifically designed for durability and professional appearance." My father laughed, not the warm, genuine laughter I remembered from childhood, but the cold, dismissive sound he reserved for ideas he found particularly absurd. Professional appearance? Son, I've seen more impressive uniforms on restaurant. Managers? At least their employers pay them enough to afford decent clothing. Marcus joined in with a smirk. Come on, Dad, give him some credit. I'm sure that uniform cost the military at least $50, maybe even $60 with all those fancy ribbons, the ribbons. Each one represented months of training, specialized qualifications, commendations for excellence in various technical and leadership assessments. But to them, they were just colorful decorations, as meaningless as participation trophies from a children's soccer league. Those ribbons represent specialized training and achievements, I said, my voice remaining level despite the frustration building inside my chest. Each one signifies competency in critical operational areas. Critical operational areas, my father repeated mockingly, drawing out each syllable. You mean like learning to tie knots and march in straight lines? Meanwhile, your brother just secured financing for a 200-unit residential complex. That's what I call critical operations. Deals that affect real people's lives and generate actual wealth. My mother finally spoke up, though her intervention was characteristically gentle and ineffective. William, perhaps we could discuss something else. Carter works very hard at his position. Even her defense felt like a backhanded compliment. The pause before position, suggesting she wasn't entirely sure what I actually did for a living. To be fair, the nature of my work required a level of security clearance that made casual dinner conversation explanations impossible. They knew I was in the Navy. They knew I had been stationed at various bases over the past few years. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was the true scope of my responsibilities. 6 months earlier, I had been selected for a highly classified program that identified and developed officers with exceptional strategic thinking capabilities and technical expertise. The selection process involved psychological evaluations, advanced testing in multiple disciplines, and recommendations from the highest levels of military leadership. Out of thousands of candidates, fewer than 20 had been chosen. My current assignment was unlike anything the traditional military hierarchy typically offered to officers of my rank and experience level. I was working directly with Pentagon strategic planners on next-generation naval warfare systems, contributing to decisions that would shape military doctrine for the next decade. The uniform they mocked represented not just personal achievement, but access to rooms where the most consequential conversations in national defense were taking place. But I couldn't tell them any of this. Security protocols were absolute, and even family members with security clearances weren't automatically privy to classified information outside their specific need-to-know parameters. So I sat there, enduring their ridicule while knowing that my actual responsibilities would have left them speechless. The problem with you, Carter, my father continued, warming to his theme, is that you've never understood the value of real achievement. You've always been content with participation trophies and government handouts. Look at Marcus. He's building something tangible, something that will last. He's creating value in the real world. The irony was almost overwhelming. While Marcus was certainly successful in civilian terms, his achievements were measured in dollars and square footage. My work involved systems and strategies that could potentially save thousands of lives and protect national interests on a global scale. But explaining this would violate every security protocol I had sworn to uphold. I'm proud of my service, I said simply. And I'm proud of the work I do. Proud, my father scoffed. Pride doesn't pay mortgages or build retirement accounts. Pride doesn't create jobs or stimulate economic growth. You're 26 years old, Carter, and you're still dependent on government paychecks like some kind of welfare recipient, the U. Comparison to welfare was particularly cutting, given my father's well-documented opinions about government assistance programs. In his worldview, anyone who received money from taxpayers was somehow morally compromised, regardless of the service they provided in return. Emma finally found her voice. Dad, that's not fair. Carter serves his country. That's honorable work. Honorable work that pays peanuts and leads nowhere, my father replied dismissively. When he's 40 years old and still wearing that cheap uniform, still taking orders from other people, still living paycheck to paycheck on government scraps, maybe he'll understand what I'm trying to teach him. The prediction stung because it revealed how completely he misunderstood the trajectory of my career. But again, I couldn't correct his assumptions without violating security protocols. All I could do was maintain my composure and trust that time would eventually reveal the truth. What none of them knew was that time was running out much faster than they imagined. The next morning arrived with the crisp efficiency that had become second nature to my military routine. While the Blackwood household was still buried under Egyptian cotton sheets and silence, I was already dressed and reviewing classified briefings on my encrypted tablet. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sitting in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by high school tennis trophies and college textbooks, while analyzing naval intelligence reports that would determine the deployment of carrier strike groups across 3 ocean theaters. My phone buzzed at exactly 0630 hours. Captain Sarah Mitchell, my direct liaison to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, never deviated from protocol timing. Commander Blackwood? Her voice carried the familiar tone of someone accustomed to delivering information that could alter the course of nations. Admiral Harrison requests your presence at Pearl Harbor by 1400 hours tomorrow. The Secretary of Defense will be participating via secure video conference. The weight of those words would have impressed even my father had he possessed the security clearance to understand their significance. Admiral Jonathan Harrison wasn't just another high-ranking officer. He was the Pacific Fleet commander, responsible for naval operations across half the globe. When Admiral Harrison requested your presence, it meant decisions were being made at the highest levels of American military strategy. Understood, Captain? Should I prepare the Morrison Protocol analysis? Affirmative. Your recommendations regarding the new submarine detection systems have caught considerable attention in Washington. The Admiral wants your full assessment before the Appropriations Committee meeting next week. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. After ending the call, I stared out my bedroom window at the meticulously maintained gardens that had been my playground as a child. The contrast between my current reality and my family's perception of it felt almost surreal. In less than 36 hours, I would be briefing military leadership on technological innovations that could fundamentally change underwater warfare. Yet downstairs, my father was probably reading the financial section and muttering about his son's government welfare job. The morning progressed with typical Blackwood household rhythms. My mother attended her yoga class before meeting friends for brunch at the country club. Emma left early for her psychology classes at UCLA. Marcus was already in his downtown office, probably coordinating with contractors and zoning officials for his latest development project. My father maintained his routine of reviewing market reports while drinking imported coffee from a machine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I spent the morning in the pool house that had been converted into my temporary office during this brief leave period. The space was equipped with secure communications equipment that allowed me to maintain my classified work responsibilities, even while visiting family. The technology was so advanced that it would have looked like science fiction to civilian observers. Yet it was standard issue for officers at my clearance level. Around noon, my father appeared at the pool house door. His unexpected visit was unusual. Typically, he avoided any space where I conducted military business, as if my work might somehow contaminate his carefully constructed civilian world. "Carter," he began, his tone suggesting he had been rehearsing this conversation. "I want to apologize for last night. Perhaps I was too harsh." The olive branch was surprising, though I suspected it came with conditions attached. My father rarely offered apologies without strategic purpose. "Your mother reminded me that different people find success through different paths," he continued, settling into one of the leather chairs that furnished the space. Maybe military service provides you with the structure and direction you need. His apology contained subtle condescension, the implication that I required external structure because I couldn't create success independently. But I had learned to navigate these conversations carefully, understanding that my father's worldview was genuinely limited by his civilian perspective. I appreciate that, Dad. Military service has definitely provided me with opportunities to develop specialized skills and work on meaningful projects. What kind of projects? He asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine curiosity in his voice rather than dismissive skepticism. This was the moment I dreaded in every family conversation. The nature of my work made honest communication impossible, yet vague responses only reinforced their perception that my responsibilities were mundane and insignificant. Strategic planning and analysis, I replied carefully. I work with senior leadership on operational efficiency and technological integration. Operational efficiency, he repeated, nodding slowly. That sounds like management consulting. Perhaps your skills are more transferable to civilian careers than I realized. The irony was almost painful. My father was trying to find ways to connect my military experience to business concepts he understood, completely unaware that my actual responsibilities involved decisions that affected global military balance and national security at the highest levels. The skills are definitely transferable, I agreed diplomatically. Leadership, strategic thinking, complex problem solving, these abilities apply across many different sectors. My father brightened noticeably. Exactly. And with your mathematical background and analytical training, you could easily transition into corporate strategy or financial analysis. Marcus could probably find you a position with one of our consulting firms. The suggestion that I would need my brother's help finding employment revealed how completely my father misunderstood my career trajectory. Officers at my level were routinely recruited by defense contractors, think tanks, and Fortune 500 companies specifically for our expertise and security clearances. The transition to civilian careers, when it happened, typically involved multiple competing offers and substantial salary increases. That's thoughtful of you to consider, I replied noncommittally. But I'm actually quite satisfied with my current trajectory. Current trajectory, my father mused. How far can that trajectory realistically take you? What's the highest rank you could potentially achieve? The question revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of military career progression. He was thinking in terms of corporate hierarchies, where advancement was primarily determined by revenue generation and networking, relationships. Military promotion, particularly at senior levels, involved complex evaluations of leadership capability, technical expertise, strategic thinking, and operational effectiveness. Military advancement depends on many factors, I explained. Performance, specialized qualifications, leadership potential, and the needs of the service. But realistically, he pressed, you're not going to become a general or admiral, are you? Those positions require political connections and decades of traditional military experience. His assumption that I lacked the qualifications for senior military leadership was particularly ironic, given my current assignment. Officers selected for the strategic planning program were specifically identified as having exceptional potential for accelerated advancement. My work was already influencing decisions made by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and my recommendations were being incorporated into doctrine that would guide military operations for years to come. You'd be surprised what's possible with the right combination of skills and opportunities, I said carefully. My father interpreted this as youthful optimism rather than informed confidence. I admire your ambition, son, but ambition without realistic planning often leads to disappointment. You're 26 years old. It's not too late to consider alternative career paths that could provide better financial security and advancement opportunities. The conversation was interrupted by my secure phone, buzzing with an encrypted message. The display showed only a numerical code, but I recognized it immediately as a priority communication requiring immediate attention. "I need to take this," I said, moving toward the communication equipment. My father stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Think about what I said, Carter. There's no shame in recognizing when it's time to pursue new opportunities. The family business could benefit from your analytical skills." After he left, I accessed the encrypted message. Admiral Harrison's schedule had changed. Instead of meeting tomorrow afternoon, he would be arriving at Pearl Harbor tonight and wanted to conduct the briefing first thing in the morning. More significantly, the Pacific Fleet's senior staff would be attending, along with representatives from the Pentagon and the National Security Council. The scope of tomorrow's meeting meant that my recommendations regarding submarine detection systems weren't just being evaluated, they were being prepared for immediate implementation across the entire Pacific theater. The technology I had helped develop would soon be protecting American naval assets from Hawaii to the South China Sea. I began preparing my materials for the early morning flight to Hawaii, knowing that my family would assume I was simply returning to another routine military assignment. The gulf between their perception and my reality had never felt wider. What they couldn't know was that tomorrow's meeting would set in motion a series of events that would fundamentally change how they understood my place in the world. Admiral Sai. Harrison wasn't just reviewing my work. He was preparing to announce my promotion to a position that would make me one of the youngest officers ever to hold such responsibility in the Pacific Fleet. The uniform they had mocked at dinner would soon carry insignia that would leave them speechless. The C-17 Globemaster III touched down at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam at 0545 hours, Hawaii time. Through the aircraft's small windows, I watched the sun paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson, the same waters where my grandfather had served during World War II. The historical weight of the moment wasn't lost on me. 3 generations of military service, yet I was the first to reach the levels of strategic responsibility that lay ahead. Admiral Harrison's aide, Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres, met me at the tarmac with the kind of precision that marked truly important occasions. Her uniform was immaculate, her demeanor professional yet urgent. "Commander Blackwood, the Admiral, is already in the secure briefing room. The Pentagon participants have been connected via satellite link for the past 20 minutes. We moved through the base with practiced efficiency." Pearl Harbor carried an almost sacred atmosphere for naval officers. The memorials, the historical significance, the weight of decisions that had shaped the course of world history. Walking these grounds while carrying classified intelligence that could influence future conflicts felt like participating in an unbroken chain of service stretching back decades. The secure briefing facility was located in a building that most visitors never saw. Behind blast-resistant walls and electromagnetic shielding, America's most sensitive naval intelligence operations were coordinated. My security badge granted access to areas that required clearances held by fewer than 1,000 people nationwide. Admiral Day. Harrison stood as I entered the main briefing room. At 58, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of making life and death decisions under pressure. His career included combat commands, strategic planning, roles, and diplomatic assignments that had earned him respect across all branches of military service. "Commander Blackwood," he said, extending his hand with a firm grip. "Your analysis of the Morrison submarine detection protocols has generated considerable interest in Washington. The Secretary of Defense specifically requested that your recommendations be fast-tracked for implementation." The Morrison Protocol represented 18 months of intensive research and development work. Traditional sonar systems, while effective, had limitations in detecting the newest generation of ultra-quiet submarines being deployed by potential adversaries. My team had developed an integrated approach combining acoustic analysis, thermal, tracking, and artificial intelligence prediction algorithms that could identify threats with unprecedented accuracy. "Thank you, Admiral. The system integration tests exceeded our projected performance parameters by 37%. More importantly, Admiral Harrison continued, your strategic deployment recommendations could revolutionize how we maintain maritime security across the Pacific theater. Please begin your presentation. The next 90 minutes involved the kind of high-level strategic discussion that my family would have found impossible to comprehend. Pentagon officials participated via secure video conference from Washington, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, budget requirements, and operational effectiveness projections. My responses drew from months of classified research and analysis that represented the cutting edge of naval warfare technology. The system can be deployed fleet-wide within 6 months, I explained, manipulating holographic displays that showed submarine tracking data across thousands of square miles of ocean. Initial installation on carrier strike groups Alpha and Bravo could begin within 30 days, with full operational capability achieved by the end of the fiscal quarter. General Patricia Lawson, participating from the Pentagon, leaned forward on the video screen. Commander, your projections assume optimal conditions. What contingencies have you prepared for technical failures or adversarial countermeasures? The question demonstrated the level of scrutiny applied to recommendations at this security level. Every variable had been analyzed, every potential failure point identified and addressed. We've developed 3 separate backup protocols, I responded, accessing additional classified data streams. System redundancy ensures 97% operational availability even under hostile electronic warfare conditions. Additionally, the AI learning algorithms continuously adapt to new threats, making traditional countermeasures increasingly ineffective over time. Admiral Harrison exchanged meaningful glances with his senior staff. In military leadership, certain moments carried weight that extended beyond immediate operational considerations. This was clearly one of those moments. Commander Blackwood, the Admiral said, his tone shifting to something more formal and ceremonial. Based on your exceptional performance on the Morrison Protocol and your demonstrated strategic capabilities, I have recommendations that require your immediate attention. He opened a sealed folder marked with classification symbols that indicated the highest levels of security clearance. The documents inside would determine the next phase of my career and, unknown to my family, fundamentally alter their understanding of my position in the military hierarchy. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have approved your promotion to the rank of captain, effective immediately. Additionally, you are being assigned command of the Pacific Fleet Strategic Operations Division, reporting directly to this office. The words hung in the air like artillery shells finding their target. Promotion to captain typically required 15 to 20 years of service and demonstrated excellence across multiple command assignments. At 26, I would become one of the youngest officers in modern naval history to achieve this rank. More significantly, command of the Strategic Operations Division meant responsibility for coordinating naval intelligence and operational planning across the entire Pacific Ocean. The position involved regular briefings with the National Security Council, joint operations with allied navies, and strategic decisions that could influence global maritime security. Sir, I'm honored by this assignment and prepared to assume these responsibilities immediately. The promotion ceremony will be held tomorrow at 1400 hours, Admiral Harrison continued. Given the sensitive nature of your new position, we're planning a relatively small ceremony limited to senior Pacific Fleet Command staff. However, I understand you have family in California. Would you like to invite them to attend? The invitation was both generous and strategically significant. Military promotion ceremonies, particularly at this level, were formal occasions that clearly demonstrated an officer's standing within the service hierarchy. My family's attendance would provide them with an unambiguous understanding of my actual responsibilities and achievements. Yes, Admiral. I believe my family would be honored to attend. Excellent. My staff will coordinate the travel arrangements and security clearances necessary for civilian guests. After the formal briefing concluded, I remained in the secure facility to review the classified materials associated with my new command position. The scope of responsibility was genuinely staggering. Oversight of intelligence operations affecting shipping lanes from Alaska to Australia, coordination with allied navies across a dozen nations, and strategic planning for scenarios that could potentially prevent or manage international conflicts. My secure phone contained several missed calls from home. Emma had texted asking about my travel plans. My mother wanted to confirm Christmas dinner arrangements. And Marcus had sent a message about a business opportunity he thought might interest me after my military phase ended. Their casual assumptions about my career timeline would be dramatically corrected within 24 hours. The promotion ceremony would require them to witness something that would fundamentally challenge their understanding of military service, career achievement, and my place within both hierarchies. When Admiral Harrison rendered his salute to newly promoted Captain Blackwood, the gesture would carry the weight of respect between senior military leaders, not the patronizing acknowledgement they imagined defined my service. I began composing the invitation message to my family, knowing that their response would reveal just how completely they had misunderstood the trajectory of my career. Tomorrow would provide them with an education in military hierarchy that no amount of civilian success could have prepared them to comprehend. The uniform they had mocked was about to display insignia that would command respect in the highest levels of American military leadership. The text message I sent to my family was deliberately understated. Attending a military ceremony at Pearl Harbor tomorrow at 2 p.m. Would appreciate your presence if you can arrange travel on short notice. Details to follow. Within 30 minutes, my phone was buzzing with confused responses. Emma was excited about visiting Hawaii but puzzled by the urgency. My mother wanted to know if I was receiving some kind of award. Marcus asked if this was related to a promotion or something. My father's response was characteristically blunt. What kind of ceremony requires family attendance with less than 24 hours' notice? This seems poorly planned. Lieutenant Commander Torres handled the logistics with military precision. By evening, first-class tickets to Honolulu had been arranged for my family, along with hotel accommodations at a resort near Pearl Harbor. The speed and quality of these arrangements should have indicated the significance of the occasion, but I suspected my family would attribute it to standard military travel benefits rather than the influence of Pacific Fleet Command. I spent the evening in my temporary quarters reviewing the classified briefings that would define my new responsibilities. Command of the Pacific Fleet Strategic Operations Division involved coordination with intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and allied naval forces across 17 nations. The position typically required decades of experience and political connections at the highest levels of military leadership. At 26, I would be assuming responsibilities that most officers never approached throughout their entire careers. The morning of the ceremony arrived with tropical warmth and crystalline skies. Pearl Harbor's historical significance felt especially profound as I prepared for an event that would fundamentally alter my family's understanding of military service. The ceremony location was the Admiral's quarters courtyard, surrounded by buildings that had witnessed some of the most consequential moments in American naval history. My family's arrival at 1300 hours was a study in confused expectations. Emma wore a sundress appropriate for a casual Hawaiian vacation. My mother had chosen elegant business attire, suitable for a corporate award luncheon. Marcus arrived in his standard executive uniform, tailored suit, Italian leather shoes, and the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to being the most successful person in any room. My father wore his most expensive golf attire, clearly expecting an informal outdoor gathering. Their expressions as they passed through security checkpoints revealed growing bewilderment. The multiple identification checks, metal detectors, and background verification processes were far more extensive than anything they had experienced. Lieutenant Commander Torres guided them through the security protocols with diplomatic efficiency, but I could see my family exchanging puzzled glances as they encountered the reality of high-security military facilities. "This is quite elaborate. For a routine military ceremony," my father commented as they were escorted through corridors lined with portraits of previous Pacific Fleet commanders. "Are you receiving some kind of service medal?" Before I could respond, we entered the courtyard where the ceremony would take place. The setup was unmistakably formal and significant. Rows of chairs faced a podium bearing the Pacific Fleet seal. Senior officers from across the command were already seated, their uniforms displaying ribbons and insignia that represented decades of distinguished service. A military band was positioned to provide ceremonial music, and honor guards stood, at attention with rifles and flags. My family's casual expectations evaporated as they absorbed the scene. Emma whispered to our mother, "This looks like something you'd see on the news." Marcus straightened his tie and surveyed the assembled officers with new interest. My father's expression shifted from casual dismissal to genuine curiosity as he recognized the formal military ceremony unfolding around them. Admiral Harrison appeared at exactly 1400 hours, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone present. His uniform displayed decorations that represented service in multiple conflicts, strategic commands across several theaters, and recognition from the highest levels of American government. When he took the podium, the assembled officers rose, to attention with synchronized precision. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and fellow naval officers," Admiral Harrison began, his voice carrying across the courtyard with practiced authority, "we are gathered today to recognize exceptional service and to invest extraordinary responsibility in an officer whose achievements have earned respect throughout the Pacific Fleet and the Pentagon." My parents exchanged glances. This was clearly far beyond the routine ceremony they had anticipated. The Admiral's words suggested something significant was about to unfold, though they still couldn't comprehend the scope of what they were about to witness. Commander Carter Blackwood has demonstrated strategic thinking and technical expertise that have directly contributed to American naval superiority in the Pacific Theater. His work on classified projects has earned recognition from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and implementation across our entire fleet structure. The mention of classified projects and Joint Chiefs of Staff recognition caused my father to lean forward with new attention. These were references that even civilian observers understood as indicators of high-level military responsibility. Today, we have the honor of promoting Commander Blackwood to the rank of captain and investing him with command of the Pacific Fleet Strategic Operations Division. The words hit my family like depth charges detonating in deep water. Emma's mouth fell open. My mother gripped her purse with both hands. Marcus sat back in his chair as if physically struck. My father's expression transformed from curiosity to shock to something approaching disbelief. Promotion to captain in the Navy was equivalent to colonel in other branches, a senior officer rank that typically required 15 to 20 years of service and exceptional performance across multiple command assignments. At 26, I would be joining the ranks of military leadership that most officers aspired to reach at the end of distinguished careers. Command of strategic operations meant responsibility for intelligence coordination, operational planning, and strategic decision-making across the largest naval theater in the world. The position involved regular briefings with the National Security Council, joint operations with allied fleets, and influence over policies that affected global maritime security. Admiral Harrison continued, "The Pacific Fleet Strategic Operations Division coordinates naval activities across 53 million square miles of ocean, from the Arctic Circle to Antarctica, from the west coast of the Americas to the shores of Asia. This command position requires extraordinary judgment, technical expertise, and strategic vision." My father was now staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of shock, confusion, and what might have been the first stirrings of genuine respect. The cheap uniform he had mocked 3 days earlier was about to display captain's insignia that would command salutes from officers throughout the Pacific Fleet. Captain Blackwood's new responsibilities will include coordination with defense intelligence agencies, strategic planning for joint operations with allied navies, and oversight of technological developments that will define naval warfare for the next decade. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. I stepped forward as Admiral Harrison administered the oath associated with my new command position. The words carried weight that extended far beyond personal achievement. I was accepting responsibility for decisions that could affect thousands of lives and influence international maritime security. When the Admiral pinned Captain's insignia on my uniform, the gesture was witnessed by senior officers whose careers spanned decades of distinguished service. Their presence validated the significance of the promotion and the trust being placed in my capabilities. But the moment that would forever alter my family's perception came when Admiral Harrison stepped back and rendered the sharpest salute of his career, a gesture of respect between senior military leaders that acknowledged my new position within the Pacific Fleet hierarchy. The salute wasn't the patronizing acknowledgement of a junior officer that my family had imagined defined my service. It was recognition of command authority and strategic responsibility at the highest levels of American military leadership. The reception following the ceremony took place in the Admiral's private quarters, a space reserved for the most distinguished occasions in Pacific Fleet operations. Crystal chandeliers that had witnessed decades of military history cast warm light over assembled officers whose combined service represented centuries of naval expertise. My family moved through this gathering like visitors to an alien world, suddenly aware they were surrounded by individuals whose responsibilities extended far beyond their civilian comprehension. Admiral Harrison approached my parents with the diplomatic grace that had earned him respect in both military and political circles. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, you should be extraordinarily proud of your son's achievements. Captain Blackwood's strategic innovations will influence naval operations for decades to come. The title Captain Blackwood seemed to physically impact my father. Each time someone used my new rank, I watched him process the reality that his son, the one he had dismissed as wearing a cheap uniform, now held a position of authority that commanded respect from admirals and Pentagon officials. Admiral, my father began hesitantly. I must admit, we had no idea Carter held such significant responsibilities. That's understandable, Admiral Harrison replied diplomatically. The classified nature of Captain Blackwood's work requires strict security protocols. Even family members cannot be informed about sensitive operations until appropriate clearances are obtained. My mother finally found her voice. When you say classified work, what exactly does that involve? Admiral Harrison glanced at me before responding, understanding the delicate balance between family education and security requirements. Captain Blackwood has been instrumental in developing submarine detection systems that protect American naval assets across the Pacific. His recommendations have been implemented fleet-wide and have already prevented potential security incidents that could have escalated into international conflicts. The revelation that my work had prevented international incidents left my family speechless. Emma stared at me as if seeing a completely different person. Marcus had abandoned his usual confident demeanor, replaced by something approaching awe. My father appeared to be struggling with cognitive dissonance, reconciling his dismissive assumptions with evidence of achievements that dwarfed his own business success. General Lawson, participating via secure video link from the Pentagon, requested a moment to address my family directly. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, your son's contributions to national security have earned recognition at the highest levels of American defense leadership. The President's National Security Council specifically cited Captain Blackwood's work in their quarterly strategic assessment. Presidential recognition represented a level of achievement that existed beyond anything my family had imagined possible in military service. Their understanding of success had been limited to business metrics, revenue, profit margins, market share. But national security contributions operated on scales that affected millions of lives and international stability. Lieutenant Commander Torres approached with a folder containing declassified portions of my service record that could be shared with family members holding temporary security clearances. The documents revealed aspects of my career progression that had been invisible to civilian observers. Captain Blackwood graduated first in his class from the Naval Academy, Torres explained, completed advanced strategic planning courses at the Naval War College, and was selected for the Pentagon's Strategic Innovation Program, a designation held by fewer than 50 officers Navy-wide. The Strategic Innovation Program represented the military's identification of officers with exceptional potential for senior leadership roles. Selection involved psychological evaluations, intelligence assessments, and recommendations from FLAG, officers across all service branches. It was essentially the military equivalent of being identified as a future CEO by Fortune 500 companies, except the stakes involved national security rather than corporate profits. My father absorbed this information with visible difficulty. Strategic Innovation Program, he repeated slowly. How many officers are selected for this program annually? Typically fewer than 20 across all branches of service, Torres replied. Selection is based on demonstrated excellence in multiple areas: technical expertise, strategic thinking, leadership potential, and recommendations from senior command staff. Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying unfamiliar uncertainty. Carter, why didn't you tell us about any of this? The question revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of military service and security requirements. Security protocols prevent discussion of classified work, I explained. Even family members with clearances can only be informed about specific operations on a need-to-know basis. Admiral Harrison added context that helped them understand the broader implications. Captain Blackwood's new command position involves coordination with intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and allied naval forces across 17 nations. The decisions made in strategic operations affect maritime security from Alaska to Australia. The scope of responsibility was genuinely staggering when explained in terms my family could comprehend. My father had built his success managing real estate developments across Southern California. I would now be coordinating naval operations across 53 million square miles of ocean, affecting the security of nations across multiple continents. Captain Blackwood, Admiral Harrison announced, your first strategic briefing with Allied commanders is scheduled for next week in Singapore. The Australian, Japanese, and South Korean naval attachés specifically requested your participation in planning exercises for the South China Sea. International strategic planning represented the pinnacle of military responsibility. The fact that Allied nations specifically requested my participation demonstrated recognition that extended beyond American naval hierarchy. My expertise was now considered essential for coordinating multinational maritime security operations. The ceremony concluded with formal photographs that would be distributed to military publications and archived in Pacific Fleet historical records. My family posed alongside senior officers whose careers represented the highest levels of American military achievement. The contrast with their earlier dismissive attitudes was almost surreal. As we prepared to leave Pearl Harbor, my father requested a private conversation. We walked along the harbor's edge, where memorials to previous generations of naval service provided appropriate context for our discussion. Carter, he began, his voice carrying unfamiliar humility. I owe you an apology. That goes far beyond what I said at dinner. I completely misunderstood the significance of your service and your achievements. The admission represented a fundamental shift in our relationship. For the first time in years, my father was acknowledging that his civilian perspective had limitations, that success could be measured in ways that extended beyond business metrics. I made assumptions based on my own limited understanding of military careers, he continued. I had no idea that naval service could involve responsibilities of this magnitude, or that someone your age could achieve positions of such authority and influence. Most civilians don't understand the scope of military operations, I replied diplomatically. the classified nature of much of the work makes it difficult to communicate the actual responsibilities involved. When I mocked your uniform, my father said quietly, I was looking at the clothing of someone whose decisions affect international security. I was dismissing achievements that have earned recognition from admirals and Pentagon officials. That uniform represents authority and responsibility that I never imagined possible. The cheap polyester costume that had sparked his ridicule now displayed captain's insignia that would command salutes from officers throughout the Pacific Fleet. The ribbons he had compared to participation trophies represented specialized training and commendations that qualified me for strategic responsibilities affecting global maritime security. Our flight back to California was markedly different from the journey to Hawaii. My family treated me with new respect that bordered on deference. Emma asked thoughtful questions about naval operations and international security. Marcus inquired about the transition from military to civilian careers, clearly recognizing that my experience opened doors to opportunities he had never considered. My mother expressed pride that finally matched the significance of my achievements. But it was my father's transformation that represented the most profound change. The man who had questioned the value of government service now understood that military leadership involved responsibilities that dwarfed most civilian achievements. The son he had urged to pursue real careers was already operating at levels of authority and influence that few business leaders ever approached. 3 days after mocking my cheap uniform, William Blackwood III sat in first-class accommodations, arranged by Pacific Fleet Command, accompanying his son, Captain Carter Blackwood, Commander of Strategic Operations, back from a promotion ceremony that had redefined their entire family's understanding of success, service, and the true meaning of that uniform. 6 months later, the Blackwood family dining room had undergone a subtle but profound transformation. The same crystal chandelier cast light over the mahogany table, but the conversations that took place beneath it carried an entirely different tone. Where once my military service had been dismissed as a temporary phase, it now commanded genuine respect and fascination from family members who had finally grasped the scope of what I actually did for a living. The changes began immediately upon our return from Hawaii. My father, who had spent years networking at country club events to build business relationships, now found himself casually mentioning that his son commanded Pacific Fleet strategic operations. The social capital associated with having a family member in senior military leadership proved surprisingly valuable in his real estate circles, where many clients had defense contracts or military backgrounds. Marcus had perhaps undergone the most dramatic shift in perspective. His initial shock at witnessing my promotion ceremony evolved into genuine professional curiosity about military leadership and strategic planning. He began incorporating concepts from military logistics and operational efficiency into his development projects, often calling to discuss how strategic thinking principles might apply to civilian business challenges. Carter, he said during one of our weekly phone conversations, I've been reading about defense contracting opportunities related to your submarine detection systems. Are there commercial applications for that technology that might benefit from private sector partnerships? His questions revealed a new understanding that military innovation often drove technological advancement across multiple industries. The strategic thinking skills that military service had developed were increasingly recognized as valuable assets in civilian careers, particularly at senior executive levels. Emma had chosen to write her senior psychology thesis on military leadership development and decision-making under pressure. She interviewed me extensively about command responsibilities and the psychological aspects of making decisions that affected thousands of people across multiple nations. Her academic work provided our family with additional insight into why military service attracted individuals seeking intellectual challenges and meaningful responsibility. My mother's charity work had taken on new dimensions as well. Her connections in Newport Beach's social circles suddenly included military families and veterans organizations. she discovered that her administrative and fundraising skills translated effectively to supporting military spouse programs and veteran transition services. For the first time, she found ways to connect her civilian activities with understanding and supporting military communities. But the most significant transformation occurred in my father. The man who had built his identity around business success and civilian achievement now spoke with genuine pride about military service and national defense. He began reading military history, following international security developments, and asking informed questions about strategic challenges facing American naval operations. During one particularly memorable dinner conversation, he demonstrated just how completely his perspective had changed. "I've been following the situation in the South China Sea," he said, referring to ongoing tensions between China and allied nations over maritime territorial claims. "From what I understand, the submarine detection systems you developed are becoming crucial for maintaining freedom of navigation in those waters." His statement revealed sophisticated understanding of geopolitical issues that extended far beyond his previous focus on domestic real estate markets. The dismissive businessman who had mocked government service now engaged thoughtfully with international security challenges that affected global commerce and stability. "The technology has been integrated across multiple fleet operations," confirmed, able to discuss certain declassified aspects of my work. "Allied navies are implementing similar systems, which strengthens collective maritime security throughout the region. It's remarkable to think that innovations developed by American military officers are protecting international shipping lanes that handle trillions of dollars in global trade," my father mused. "Your work affects economic systems that dwarf anything happening in civilian business sectors." The recognition that military strategic planning operated on scales that influenced global economic systems represented a complete reversal from his earlier dismissal of government employment. He now understood that senior military positions involved responsibilities and decision-making authority that exceeded most civilian executive roles. My promotion ceremony had also generated unexpected social consequences within our family's civilian circles. The photographs from Pearl Harbor, showing me with Admiral Harrison and senior Pacific Fleet officers, had been shared among friends and business associates. My father found that these images opened doors and generated conversations that enhanced his own professional relationships. "People react differently when they learn that my son commands strategic operations for the Pacific Fleet," he admitted during a private conversation. "There's immediate respect for military service at that level, and genuine interest in understanding what those responsibilities actually involve. The social capital associated with senior military family members was something he had never considered during his years of criticizing my career choices. Now he understood that military achievement commanded respect across civilian society, particularly at senior leadership levels where the intersection of strategic thinking and national service created unique professional credentials. The most profound change, however, was evident in how our family discussed future possibilities and career trajectories. Where once my father had urged me to consider transitioning to civilian business careers, he now recognized that military leadership at my level opened doors to opportunities that purely civilian backgrounds couldn't access. Defense contractors, intelligence agencies, multinational corporations with government relations needs, they all seek executives with your combination of strategic planning experience and security clearances, he observed. When you eventually transition to civilian careers, you'll have options that most business executives never encounter. His assessment was accurate. Senior military officers with strategic planning backgrounds and high-security clearances were actively recruited by Fortune 500 companies, consulting firms, think tanks, and defense contractors. The skills developed through commanding complex military operations, crisis management, international coordination, technological integration, and strategic decision-making under pressure were increasingly valued in civilian executive positions, but, more significantly, my father now understood that military service wasn't merely a stepping stone to civilian success. It was a career path that offered intellectual challenges, meaningful responsibility, and opportunities to influence events on global scales. The transition to civilian careers, when it occurred, would be by choice rather than necessity, and would likely involve multiple competing offers rather than desperate job searches. The dinner table conversations that had once centered around business deals and profit margins now included discussions of international security, technological innovation, and strategic challenges facing democratic nations. My father's questions demonstrated genuine interest in understanding how military leadership contributed to national security and global stability. "When you brief Pentagon officials and allied commanders," he asked recently, "what kinds of decisions are actually being made in those meetings? Strategic resource allocation, threat assessment, operational coordination with allied forces, technology deployment timelines?" I replied. "The decisions affect how American naval assets are positioned across the Pacific, how allied navies coordinate security operations, and how emerging technologies are integrated into existing defense systems." The scope of responsibility represented in those brief descriptions encompassed decision-making authority that affected millions of lives across multiple continents. My father now understood that the cheap uniform he had mocked represented access to rooms where some of the most consequential decisions in international security were made. As I prepared for my next assignment, a joint command position coordinating anti-submarine warfare operations with NATO allies in the Mediterranean, my family's transformation felt complete. The son who had been dismissed as pursuing a government welfare job was now recognized as holding positions of genuine authority and strategic importance. The uniform that had sparked such derision during that memorable dinner now hung in my closet, displaying captain's insignia, campaign ribbons from classified operations, and qualification badges that represented expertise in areas most civilians never encountered. But more importantly, it represented a career path that had exceeded every expectation my family had held for civilian professional success. The crystal chandelier still cast the same warm light over family dinners. The mahogany table remained, unchanged. But the conversations that took place in that dining room now carried the weight of genuine respect for service that extended far beyond business achievement or financial success. My father's transformation from mockery to pride represented more than personal family dynamics. It reflected a broader civilian recognition that military service, at senior levels, involved responsibilities and achievements that commanded respect across all sectors of American society. The cheap polyester costume had become a symbol of honor, achievement, and service to something greater than personal profit. And finally, my family understood exactly what that meant. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.